Okay, and we're ready to start. Welcome, everyone. Today is March 28th, and we're so pleased that you can join us for our Reach Our Alliance info session exclusively with our, in partnership with Rotman School of Management here at the University of Toronto. And we're so pleased to have two of our Reach researchers who are current Rotman students join us today. So Sarah George and Peter Zhang. And so you'll have a chance to answer questions and be part of the discussion live. So to get started, just a few housekeeping rules in terms of live transcription is enabled. So if you need that for accessibility purposes, you're welcome to turn that on Zoom. Second, you can submit your questions over the Q&A chat, and we will be answering questions as we can through the chat, and as well as we'll have dedicated time at the end for live Q&A. So to get started, we will review kind of the history of the Reach Alliance and what we're all about, and an overview of the researcher experience. And there really is no better person than our executive director and as well as a Reach alum to tell that story. And we'll have two of our student researchers share their experience, and in particular, how they see the application from the business world and their Reach experience. And then I'll review the technical parts of the application process and review some of the requirements and eligibility. So with that, I will hand the Zoom mic to Maren to get us started.
Great. Thank you so much, Moni. And Peter and Sarah, thank you so much for being here and participating in the session. We're so thrilled to hear from you. And thanks to all the folks that have joined us on the line and that will watch the recording in the days and weeks to come. We really look forward to receiving your application. As you can imagine, having students from the Rotman School is really critical to the cohort, and you bring such a unique and valuable perspective. And Peter and Sarah will speak to that more certainly, but we really do notice it on the teams and the contributions that you make to these teams. So we do hope that this is something that is of interest to you and that you can see yourself applying to. I'll start, as Moni mentioned, with a bit of an overview and context setting for the Reach Alliance. So this quote, disaggregate the data, and we find that our statistical national successes are masking moral and practical failures. People are left behind simply because they live in rural communities, urban slums, in conflict zones, as part of Indigenous groups with disabilities, or because simply they are girls. So the Reach Alliance is really focused on this idea of populations that are left behind. And really the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals has inspired the work and all of the research that we do here at the Reach Alliance. And they're quite unequivocal in the sense that it is about leaving no one behind. So 100% inclusion, 0% exclusion. And how do we get these essential goods and services to these hard to reach groups? So Reach was founded in 2015 here at the University of Toronto. We make note of this because now we actually are a global initiative. We have partnerships at the University College London, Oxford, Tec de Monterrey in Mexico, and we're actually currently building out 3 more university partnerships in other countries around the world as we speak. So by the time that this cohort is recruited, there will likely be 7 universities in total that are participating and collaborating in this initiative. While your research team is based at the host institution where you study, there are lots of opportunities for collaboration with the partners, schools, and the students and faculty at these other sites. We're funded by the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, and we have been for the past number of years. They're based in New York City and are very much in support of the scale-up work that we've been doing. And as I mentioned, we are inspired by the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So if you're not familiar with those, we really encourage you to take a look and get a little bit more information through the link we've provided here in advance of submitting your application. They're an important framework that we use to really ground all of our efforts. At the core, though, we are a student-driven, faculty-mentored research and leadership initiative, and we're specifically focused and dedicated on investigating how to get important things, social goods and services, to those that are hardest to reach. Our research has been featured in leading outlets around the world. Publications can be found on our website, and as well, all of our case study reports are available on the website as well. this is, a very high level description of what it is that we do. So our vision and mission. So as I've already said, we are here focused on investigating how to get important stuff to everyone everywhere. You'll notice important stuff is in brackets because we really cover the full range of social programs. So we think about how to get cash transfers to populations, how do you get energy access, how do you get vaccines, and all range of products and services. Our mission is to pursue the full achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by equipping and empowering the next generation of leaders to create knowledge. So by this, we mean the case study research and those case study publications, and really then to inspire action. So we're doing research with the intention of positioning it for impact. And I know Peter's a great example of doing that with his work and has published many pieces related to his projects. So I'm sure he'll speak to that more, but it really is about doing research that is positioned for impact. You can see some stats here as well on the right about our network. Now, this is again a summary of the research we've done to date. I know that the text is incredibly small, so I encourage you to zoom in once you receive the slide deck. But really what this illustrates is the breadth of focus that our work has. So both geographically, as you can see, in many countries around the world, we focus on projects, but as well, the topics are quite diverse and broad. So I encourage you to look into that a little bit more closely. You'll also see these 3 institutional icons, and those are representative of our university partners. And thanks, Moni. Perfect. So these are our faculty mentors here at the University of Toronto for this year. So in past years, we've worked very closely with Professor McGann, who is of course one of our very dear faculty mentors at the Rotman School, and I'm sure many of you know Professor McGann. And so these are. These folks are very illustrative of the fact that we do really recruit faculty from across all parts of the university. So we've got folks from social work, from medicine, from law, Rotman, and pretty much everything in between. So we do like the faculty mentors to also be representative of the students that we recruit, to ensure that we are bringing a diverse perspective to the research questions that we are asking. Equity, diversity, and inclusion really underpins all of the work that we do. So from recruitment of our student and faculty cohorts all the way through the research process, and then finally in the culmination of the research reports that we write and the communication and dissemination strategy that accompany those documents. We engaged in a consultative process with the Anti-Racism and Cultural Diversity Office here at the University of Toronto. It was about a five-month process where we worked closely with our researchers, our faculty, the staff, and a number of other key stakeholders in our community to develop our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Charter. And I encourage you to take a look at that when you do get a chance. You can see our 6 principles here on the right-hand side, as well as the commitments that we have come to and co-created are outlined in the charter. But as I say, I do encourage you to take a look at the link here to learn a little bit more about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and how that plays a role in the REACH experience. I won't speak in too much detail to the program overview because I know that Peter and Sarah can do a much better job of that than I can, especially being Rotman students. But I will say a few things at a high level. So the project cycle is 12 to 16 months. There is quite a range here. And the reason really being that the case study report takes about a year to get to the case study report, which is the only required deliverable of participating in the REACH experience. So you work on that in conjunction with your faculty and your students, the other students on your team. Some teams do go on to write a peer-reviewed publication or an op-ed or produce other knowledge translation products. And again, I know Peter will likely speak to that in his comments, but that's something that we have staff support to help facilitate, but it's not a requirement. So those teams that take a little bit of extra time to produce some of those other deliverables are welcome to do so, but not required. The process looks like faculty's faculty mentors really supporting students to select those case study topics. So we get a lot of questions about how case studies are selected. That's a student-driven process. So our students will come to us once selected for the cohort. Our students will come to us and suggest different topics for consideration. The selection process is very much guided by the faculty mentors. So they provide some considerations and parameters through which to guide your search, but that process is really driven by students, the rest of your cohort, and as well the faculty mentors for the cohort. Research is done both in a secondary fashion, so literature review, desk review, as well as primary research. So those are interviews that are done with key informants that are delivering the programs that you're studying. The final component of the process is really the writing of that final case study report that happens after the secondary and the primary research is complete. And then, as I mentioned, there is that option to conduct some other, complete some other knowledge translation deliverables after the fact as appropriate. There's 3 other components that underpin and really support the research process that I think are worth noting. So one is the team performance coaching. So each of our research teams, when they're formed in the fall, which typically happens in October, they're paired with a performance coach that will work with them from project start all the way through to the end when their case study report is published. So that coach will meet with you sometimes in a one-on-one capacity to help develop your own personal skills, but as well will meet with your team and help facilitate success and ultimately drive high performance. We recruit some of the university's top students to the Reach Alliance, but what we find is that not all the time are folks coming to us with lots of experience working really effectively in teams. So the performance coaching is really meant to help facilitate that. We also offer a skills development series, and this is usually done on a monthly basis, sometimes more or less frequently, depending on where we are in the project cycle. But we bring in leading faculty, such as Professor McGann and others here at the University of Toronto, as well as some professionals, expert consultants that we have coming in around certain topic areas to deliver really key seminars for our researchers. So for example, on how to develop your research question, ethnographic research, how do you conduct interviews, how do you conduct how do you present your research in a way that's accessible to a broader audience and conduct yourself in sort of a public space. These sessions really are meant to help support and provide a foundation as you're going through this research process. Finally, the Global Alumni Network. So this is something that you are entered into after graduating. So after you've submitted your case study report, that's ultimately what we consider your graduation from the REACH program. We now have an exclusive alumni portal for REACH alum that have gone through the program, where you can access exclusive job and event opportunities, as well as other information that's being put forward by alumni or publications that are being produced. And we do have also an AI-enabled networking platform that facilitates connections across all of our partner sites. So all alumni from all of the 7 universities that participate in REACH will be involved in this platform. So it's a chance for you to connect also with colleagues and students at other universities around the world. I won't speak too much to this slide because it's essentially a graphic representation of what I've just shared. But essentially, as you can see, we are recruiting now. The cohort will be determined, at the latest by the beginning of July, sort of end of June, early July. The case study pitch process will happen over the course of the summer. It's weekly pitching sessions that go on one evening a week. In the fall, through a process of student voting and faculty input, case studies are sort of narrowed down, and the final 8, we'll be selecting 8 this year, are identified. The teams are then formed and the secondary research begins. The secondary research is then used to help put together the Research Ethics Board application. If you've never done an REB application before, not to worry, we offer a number of sessions to help facilitate that and a number of resources. So that's something we support you through. Once you've received your research ethics application, you begin that primary data collection process, so the interviews and case study report writing. The case study reports are due at the end of June, so it's sort of an intensive period once you finish class to get your case study report written, but the aim is then to have you kind of submitting your drafts at the beginning of the summer so that you're not being kind of burdened by that over the course of the summer. That's really the aim. Now, I believe just a couple more slides from me. So very quickly, knowledge translation and impact. I've already spoken to this, but the real take-home message here is the research we do is meant to be used. We are not doing research for the sake of research. So oftentimes, as I say, students will go on and produce peer-reviewed publications, such as the one here on the left. I believe Peter will maybe speak to that, publication on polio elimination. We've also got a video that we produce for each of our case studies. And then oftentimes we have students producing op-eds and other publications. Now, the last slide here is about the REACH Symposium. These speakers on the slide that you see, this is just an example that we're highlighting. This is from last year's REACH Symposium. So you can see, again, the names and titles are hard to read, but you can see all information about the event on our website from last year to give you a sense for the symposium. And then I will just quickly flag that the 2022 REACH Symposium is now open for registration. For the first time ever, we are actually making it a public event. Typically, this is an invitation only event, but this year we are opening it up to the public. Given our global expansion and scale, we feel like now is the right time to do that. So you can register for the 2022 symposium that'll be happening virtually on our website, and you can see more details there about the agenda, which will be forthcoming. But please do take a look if you're interested in learning more. I believe it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce our next speaker. And Moni, is it Peter? Yes, that's what I thought. Perfect. So Peter is a REACH alum. He studied the polio eradication team. Am I right on that, Peter? Yes. Okay, great. Got a couple of India case studies, so I always want to double check that. So as you can see, Peter is an alum from 2018, 2019, and has gone on to produce a peer-reviewed publication from his case study research, as well as, I mentioned, many other knowledge translation deliverables. So Peter, it's a real honor and privilege to have you here with us tonight. And thank you so much for being willing to share your experience. Over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Maren. So my name is Peter, and as Maren said, I was part of Team India Polio 2018 to 2019. A little bit about myself. I'm a combined PharmD MBA student at U of T. I am a licensed hospital pharmacist. I service Newmarket, and I bounce around between medicine and cardiology floors. Post MBA, I'll be going to Johnson & Johnson, and I'll be joining their neuroscience business. I have done some research in the past, and it's going to be a bit of a different type of research than what I'm going to talk about today. My work before was on corticosteroids, which are a class of medications used to treat conditions like inflammatory bowel disease. And this is your typical, your pipettes, your cells, your gels, what you would imagine we would do in the lab as science students. And that was really interesting. And it's always been one of the key aspects in my life that got me interested to do more research. During COVID, there was also a big supply gap of PPE. That was the initial stages. And another thing I was working on, and sort of just to give you an insight on how I'm trying to leverage that MBA and PharmD aspect, is we started, providing the leadership to organize 3D printers all across Canada. And we started 3D printing and manufacturing these face shields that we distributed later on to healthcare facilities in Ontario. So we managed to get around 25,000 of these face shields donated to hospitals, shelters, and clinics. My personal interests are, aside from vaccine strategy, they're in antimicrobial resistance. So in hospitals, there's these superbugs that are resistant to a variety of different antibiotics. So learning how to navigate through that process. I'm interested in governance, corporate and non-for-profit, and also sustainability. So how do we do things now that doesn't jeopardize our ability to do things in the future? That's enough about me. On the next slide, so for my project, Team Polio India, we worked on polio. So just to give a bit of context, polio is a virus, and many of you may not have heard much about it now because, in many places around the world, we don't have polio anymore. There are certain places in the world that still do, and India was one of the few places that was one of the places which still had polio even in like 2014. So one of the last countries to really get rid of polio. Now, this sounds like a really health-centered based project, but I want to tell you why, as a Rotman student, you shouldn't be intimidated by that. First of all, you can see from the team, the students, that it's very much multidisciplinary. We do have medicine, we have pharmacy, but we also have economics and political science. And I want you to know that this team was led by Dr. Anita McGaughan, who is a professor from Rotman. So, there's a lot of areas of this project that, although it looks healthcare focused, had a lot of management and business aspects. So we wanted to know how India was able to eliminate polio in its last stages, and we isolated it to the last two states, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. And these were states that had a history of conflict and also religious differences, and all of this leading to mistrust of the government. So one of the biggest barriers and challenges that we looked at was vaccine hesitancy. So a lot of people refusing to take the vaccine that was necessary to break the transmission of polio in India. And so it's not that there wasn't the science or the technology or the vaccine that was available, but it was actually the people, the community aspect, the social aspect, the marketing of the vaccine, the messaging that was necessary to really get these vaccines to the people who needed it. So we did our field work and interviews. So just to give a bit of context, we collect data by interviewing experts and people who were part of that process to really understand what was happening at the ground level back then. And we did this in Uttar Pradesh and New Delhi. So we traveled there to conduct this field work. So next slide. The process was great. You get to speak and learn from incredible people. Not only people from your team, but also people outside of your initial core team. So professional coaches. So I think Marion has mentioned a little bit about how there's someone who's there to really build that team cohesion with you. Your faculty mentors, so they provide the leadership that's absolutely necessary to drive the project forward, and they're part of your core team, and they essentially provide you the guidance, the support that makes your project a success. So you're going to have access to talk with academic experts and people who really understand this process, because you as students, and I just want to reference that, this is student led, you as students may not necessarily understand this whole process, and that's okay. You're going to have people there who know this through and through, and you're going to be supported. And also workshops, and there's a few workshops that are out there that are going to be very critical to your success. The REB workshop is very important. I've never done an REB before I did the REACH project, so it was really important to understand what that is and how to do it, and also things like writing, which is going to be important in the later stages as well. Navigating ambiguity in the field. So part of the process is you being in another country, and that comes with a lot of uncertainties. For my team in particular, you can talk to an expert, and that expert will say you should talk to someone else, and that was not part of your schedule, right? So you need to decide what you're going to do to maximize the amount of data and knowledge that you're going to gain while you're in the field. So do you split up the team? What are you going to do to really get the most out of your experience? So learning that process was quite important as well. And of course, publishing world-class research. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a later slide, but that was definitely part of the process for our team, and it's been incredibly rewarding. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. Okay, so I put up a few photos to talk about the travel. You can see that there's a bit of fun in there as well. And then there's also the work you see on the left-hand side. This is a photo myself, one of our team members, Azana, with the core group, one of the non-for-profits involved in polio elimination. You can see actually behind Azana, there's a micro map, and these are these hand-drawn maps that are able to identify which households have not yet received the vaccines. And you can see that you just dive straight into your subject matter and get exposed to a variety of different elements. So wanted to give you a flavor of what that looked like. Next slide, please. Oh, and here's the paper. And so this is the paper we published in BMJ, the British Medical Journal, Global Health. And it's just such a rewarding feeling to have the work that you've done become disseminated and in academic literature. And it's super rewarding to know that policymakers, students, such as ourselves when we're doing our own research, have access to the knowledge that we've created. And I think for our team, it was sort of the highlight of the experience as well. So just wanted to give you that as well. And then, yes, so I wanted to talk a little bit about what business students, you in particular, get out of REACH. The first is powerful networks. First of all, you have a faculty mentor who is an expert, who is going to have a lot of knowledge to share with you, a lot of networks to share with you, know the right people to talk to in different areas. I think you have just such an opportunity to meet people, to work with people. And throughout my journey as an MBA student, I know how important that is. I think one of the elements that I really appreciated is that the work you do is meaningful in such a important sort of social context as well. I just want to share, an article I wrote about vaccine hesitancy, and it's something that's transcended just sort of the work that you do isolated to the project. It transcends to the stuff that you can do beyond that as well. So what this means, what vaccine hesitancy means in the context of COVID. New skills, especially if you haven't done research before, you're going to learn a lot. I know I just showed that photo of the paper, but that process is not simple. There's a lot going on, and you learn a lot of stuff throughout that way. You learn a lot of things that may be considered soft skills as well, but like responding to peer review. That's something that you don't normally get to do on perhaps as a business student at a formal level. So it's just exposure to very unique and new skills for you, and as well as fun experiences, as I hopefully have shown you already. And then international experience. So this is one of those opportunities which takes you to another country, and you get to learn about a lot of things, for me, for example, in India, that you can take back home and support you throughout your career journey. So those are some of the things that I wanted to highlight there. I think the next slide is, so another slide to really showcase, the work that you do is meaningful, and it transcends beyond even beyond your project. This is an article I wrote for the Toronto Star about prioritizing one-shot vaccines. So there's been 2-dose schedules, the Pfizer and the Moderna, back when I wrote this, and then there's been the one-shot vaccines. And you can think about how transient populations, migrant workers, people who are difficult to track would benefit from having that one dose that offers full protection. And the ideas and the perspective that I gained from REACH were really necessary to help give me the ability and the insight to write articles like these. So very much, And I fully do, and this is another article I wrote. This is in Poets and Quants. This is an MBA publication. And I really do believe that academic research makes business students more versatile. And so this is an article talking about some of the work that I did, but also why it helps me as a business student. And I just want to I'll touch on it on the next slide, I believe. I could just, I guess I'll touch on it here. I guess I thought I had another slide there. But, one of the things that really makes you unique, I know a lot of business students are focused on internships. They're focused on grades. And there's a lot of different extracurriculars that you can do at business school as well. But doing academic research can really make you stand out. It's something really unique and makes you stand out beyond your peers. And it's just something that I wanted to highlight to you before I give you my parting advice. So in terms of how to approach and how to be involved with REACH, I encourage you to be yourself and be genuine about your ideas. There's just so much diversity and flexibility in terms of topics. I remember topics like solar panels for nomadic peoples in Mongolia, Coca-Cola's and medication supply chains in Tanzania. Don't feel like you have to pick something in particular. Pick something that you're interested in. Pick something that you really want to be involved in. And this is going to be part of your pitching process. I think that's going to really give you an authentic, outlook in terms of what you're going to get out of the process. Business students, you have important skills to offer. Think about all the stuff that you've learned in terms of strategy, finance, marketing, governance. These are all areas that can be important to any topic. So, there are specific finance related projects, and you can see how that's really tied in there. But then there's also healthcare projects that rely on a successful strategy, on successful financing that really makes it run. So don't feel as if your skills are isolated to the business world. Really think beyond that. And then lastly, your team is super important. The students that you work with, your faculty mentor who's providing the leadership for the team, your professional coaches, other REACH members and student researchers, you really want to demonstrate that you can work well in a team, because that's one of the biggest determinants to your success in this project. Thanks so much. And I believe the last slide, that's my email. I'm in LinkedIn. So if you have any questions and if you want to connect, feel free to reach out. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Peter. We'll move on to our second REACH researcher, Sarah George, who will introduce herself. And she's a current researcher, so she hasn't quite got the full spectrum as Peter outlined. So that's why it's great to have the perspective of both. So take it away, Sarah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Moni and Maren, for giving me the chance to come speak about my experience. So to give you a little bit of an overview of myself, I'm in my third year in the Rotman Commerce program, focusing on international business and data science with minors in econ and sociology. I'm also pretty involved within the program, so I'm on the case competition team, Women in Business, and I'll be joining McKinsey this summer as a BA intern. So as you can probably tell, my interests are all over the place, but one thing I've always been really passionate about was tying in some of those social elements into what we do in business. And that's what brought me to Reach Alliance. So I saw this as an opportunity to have an impact, a real impact on a community and expand my horizons kind of beyond the world of business and the typical things that we think about. And that was exactly what my experience was. So on the next slide, I talk a little bit about my project within the Reach Alliance, and it's really focused within the Jalisco or Tequila region of Mexico. Interestingly enough, my project is fairly business oriented, and I think that was a little bit of a coincidence that I got thrown into this one, but it also allowed me to refresh my Spanish skills because it was based in Mexico. And it's unique from all of the other research projects within Reach because we work directly with a partner institution called ITESO. So specifically, our project this year is trying to understand the family business model and how it helps family businesses create a unique competitive advantage and kind of strengthen their position within the market that they operate in. So specifically, there's a lot of parallels between business case studies and what we're doing. For example, we need to take into account more of those strategic factors like the customer needs, the suppliers, the competitors, product marketing, except it's really kind of on a smaller scale. So where it becomes context specific is we are working with family businesses that have really unique cultural and community considerations. So for example, Ivanes que Florecen is one of the businesses we're working with, and it's 4 women who come together from different areas of this region. They travel over an hour from different families, and they come together and create natural dyes out of plants to embroider different things. And for them, it's not just a business, it's a way to provide for their families, take skills that they've learned from their mothers and honor the nature in the areas that they're from. So it's taking something that's a business consideration and then applying a really unique cultural perspective onto it. So it's been an amazing experience. Like Moni mentioned, I'm kind of in the middle of it right now. We just conducted our first few interviews. We're really trying to understand how we can communicate best with the populations that we're working with. And this is where the idea of working with hard to reach populations comes in. That's where we've been facing some barriers in terms of access, but those are all different considerations that you maybe wouldn't have had when you're working on like a case study for a giant corporation. So it's a really unique perspective, I think, when you're working with smaller, more local businesses in a country that's not the one that you're from. So although we haven't had the chance to travel, unfortunately, because of COVID, we keep telling ourselves theoretically we would have been in Mexico these 2 weeks conducting interviews, but it's been amazing still because we've been able to work with some individuals from different organizations. So these businesses, the students from ITESO, and even a larger NGO called the Beckman Foundation. And the founders of that are actually key investors within the tequila industry. So if you're familiar with Jose Cuervo, they're really big kind of people within the industry. And so it's an amazing experience to work with them and to learn from them. So ultimately, our goal here with this research is to understand the different factors that impact how the business is run, and more importantly, how they impact the people behind them. So we haven't had any knowledge translation yet, unfortunately, because we are still in the kind of research phases of it, but I'm really excited to see what comes out of that. So beyond the project itself, Reach is unique because of all of the other support and the resources that it comes with. So for example, we talked about the skill development workshop series. So we gained broader tools to conduct research, but also other skills. So for example, storytelling, and that's something you can apply beyond just the research context into presentations that you do for school or work or whatever. In addition to that, each team is paired with 2 mentors. So you have a faculty mentor and a performance coach, and each of them have kind of a different purpose. So faculty mentors are the amazing professors that we talked about earlier. and they're really well-known professors within the University of Toronto, lots of publications and experience in academia, specifically whatever their research areas might be. And they give you really personalized mentorship on your research study. So even if their area of expertise isn't necessarily what you're researching, they bring so much knowledge on the research process and, you know, working with certain populations and things like that. So it's truly been an amazing experience working with our faculty mentor, Erica, because, you know, she's done so many of these case studies and has been able to really teach us how to navigate the process. And then the second mentor we have is a performance coach. And this is something that I think is really unique and something I'm really taking away from my Reach experience is optimizing how you work with a team. So even if your team seems absolutely amazing, there's always ways you can kind of improve on that. And so we have one-on-one sessions with our performance coaches. Sometimes they come and observe our meetings and they give us different activities and things we can do to actually just improve the way that we work. And it's something that I will definitely be taking along with me, some of the strategies that I've learned. So that's been amazing. And last but not least, one of my favorite aspects of Reach is the multidisciplinary part of our teams. So my team, for instance, I have a business background. Natalie has an engineering and Latin American studies background. Andrea studies human geography, and then Tolu's a PhD student in public health. So we all come from extremely different academic backgrounds, but that means we all have so much to learn from each other. And we always work to, you know, understand each other's personal and professional goals as well. So it's not just about the research experience, it's also about what we can learn from each other and how we can push each other. So on the next slide, I talk about some of the things I've gained from Reach. So the first one is really just thinking deeper about problem solving. So obviously in a lot of strategy courses, business courses, you learn about problem solving, but you don't consider some of those aspects like community, culture, ethics, and how you can make things accessible for hard to reach populations. And oftentimes when you're going out into the corporate world or doing your internships, these aren't the groups that you think about or talk about, but there's so many, there's an increasing need now for that to be at the top of your mind when you're in these big organizations. So that's something that I really gained, is thinking a little bit deeper about when we solve these problems. So the second one is, like I said, optimizing how we work in a team. So we all have different experiences, different areas of expertise, and we can leverage that to form the unique recommendations that we end up providing to these businesses. So there's ways that you can, understanding what you bring to the team and then continuing to improve on how you work together as a team is something that I've been able to pick up from Reach. The next one is structuring my thinking. So as a business student, this is an insanely invaluable skill. So taking something like a really broad research question that you have to create. So all you start with is just a theme or a topic, and you have to create a question, distill down all of this information. So when you're doing your secondary literature review, you read so many papers with all of this information, and then taking the important pieces of information and continuing to distill that down into what the insights are and how you can take that and do something with it. So structuring thinking is something you can take and use in any industry that you work in. Even in school, I think it's extremely applicable, and it's something that's really helped me. And the last one is meeting a diverse network. So I think Peter touched on this, and so did Marin, but your alumni, the professors, the people you work with are crazy. Like, I have been able to learn so much, even when we have socials and we meet, the few times we've been able to meet in person, and you hear about the different experiences that people on the Reach team have. It's insane, and it's not something that you'll be able to gain from other experiences. So it really helps expand your professional network. So these are kind of the main skills that I've just distilled it down to. These are the big things that I've gained from Reach. So things like problem solving, analysis-driven thinking, having a diverse network, being detail-oriented. All of these things are like just a few of the many things that I've been able to gain from Reach. And if we go on to the next slide, I think I show how that kind of looks in a career, in the business career. So for example, you have consulting, you have finance. These are some of the main streams that a lot of business kids go into. I know there's other ones like, marketing and accounting and creative industries and things like that, but these skills are directly applicable to a lot of these fields that you're going to be going into. I know for me personally, when I went through my interview process for McKinsey this last few months, they were extremely interested in my research experience because a lot of these firms have a high, a really key people focus. They are also trying to understand how to reach these hard to reach populations. So when you come in with a unique kind of perspective on that, it sets you apart from other business students, not just in the interview process, but if you go on to work for the firm, you come with a really unique perspective. So all of these skills that I've learned have been extremely valuable to my pursuit of consulting, but I'm sure they're extremely valuable to all other fields as well. So on the next slide, yeah, I mentioned this, I guess, but they really helped, these skills really helped me excel in my consulting interviews because it's a unique experience that sets you apart from other business students, who just come in with, having done school, maybe a few extracurriculars within the program. And it also gave me a chance to tie my problem solving skills with my passion for social impact. And it showed interviewers I had more complex thinking than just, being able to solve things within the business world. So this is kind of my last few pieces of advice for anyone who's applying. The first one would be show your value add. So think about what makes you unique in a team setting. So if that's your problem solving skills, if that's your business acumen, if it's your, ability to facilitate things, or if it's your interest in a certain topic even, show that value add when you do the interview process. The second one is show your complexity. So I think one thing that I found really interesting about the REACH interview process is the questions are a lot deeper than you might think. And they really, like Moni, Marin, anyone who interviews just wants to understand a little bit more about who you are as a person. So go one step further than you think you should with all of your answers, and that will really set you apart. And then the last one is show your diversity. So what experiences do you have that change the way you think about problem solving, that change the way you think about research in general, anything that you've done, even if it's not research oriented. So for example, like for me, a big thing with my sociology minor, it gave me a little bit of insight into the world of academic research, but I wanted to then employ that and take that into a more practical setting. So I think that kind of wraps up all I had to say, but I'm really excited to have had the chance to speak to all of you, and I wish all of you the best of luck in your application process.
Thank you, Sarah. And that leads me to our final section, which is the application process. All of the information that I will cover is on our website, but I will give an overview if this is the first time. So my name is Moni, and I'm the research officer here, and I oversee all of our U of T teams and our skills development workshop series that was mentioned. So the first question is, who can apply? And basically any student that's registered at the University of Toronto for the next academic year for both fall and winter terms. So it has to be the full academic year and that you're registered at U of T. And it could be at all levels of undergraduate, master's level, and PhD. And that diversity is not just within disciplines, but it's also levels of education and depths of education that really provides for a really great diverse experience across sectors and across levels. What traits are we looking for? And as it's been mentioned that this experience is quite diverse, it is very focused, but there is kind of a skill set of kind of a combination of skills that would really make for an ideal REACH candidate. And I'll just quickly review them here, but they are defined in greater detail on our who can apply section. So the ability to prioritize is an important one as a co-curricular activity. We know that the academics are priority, but that you have to maintain and balance this co-curricular activity, which has not necessarily, it's not a paid position and it's not for credit, but there are some real impact and deliverables that are needed from the team. So the ability to prioritize is a really key skill that is needed for a REACH researcher. Global citizenship, anyone that's interested in really addressing the inequities and wanting social impact, this is the opportunity to kind of go outside of or apply your field into an area that you can have an impact on challenging global situations. Team player and collaborator, and this, and I think business students probably know this better than maybe other fields, but it's very different from group work because it's not just divide and conquer and accomplish something, but actually a unit of people that have very different skill sets and availability and coming together to accomplish a goal. Effective communicators, an important one in any setting, but particularly as everyone speaks different discipline languages and is working towards a common goal, communication becomes a really key thing. Creativity and strategic thinker, and this is aligned with, in research, you will come across many hurdles, and we are looking for people that are willing to persevere, to think outside the box and see all the possibilities and make those connections. And that goes along with lifelong learner, as we offer a very enriching skills development workshop series, which will involve and expose you to many different sets of skills and topic areas. We're looking for people who are seeking to learn outside of their comfort zone and outside of their disciplines and be able to dig in more. And last but not least, an action-oriented person, because this is a student-led initiative. So we're looking for students who aren't afraid to take initiative, to take the lead. And we're disrupting the student-faculty model in that the students are leading, and then the faculties are really advising, but not making any of the key decisions. So we're looking for students that really are willing to and are excited to practice their leadership skills. So the application process, we have an online link, and you can find that on our how to apply section, and it involves kind of a general background about you, and then 4 short questions, and this relates to the experience needed. So some of your research experience, and if you don't necessarily have academic research, we're not expecting everyone to have that. This is why we exist, to provide that opportunity for those that aren't exposed to academic research, but at least skills related to researching. So if you can share your experiences related to research skills in any field, that's where you can tell us more about that. And then questions relate to kind of getting out of your comfort zone and taking the initiative and your motivation. And then we do require documents, and we are asking for people to save it in a single PDF, and they involve just kind of standard resume, your unofficial transcript. So just a copy of what the courses you've had at U of T. And if you just started, then maybe your undergraduate or graduate transcript as well, just so that there's enough courses that you can tell for the important part, which is the annotated transcript, which is what makes the REACH application unique than other applications that maybe you have been exposed to, which is we're asking you to tell us more about your story, your values, your passions, and your skills and experiences based on the 5 courses that you can select from your transcript, and tell us more about your motivations, tell us more about what you've learned. And so you can do that individually or collectively as the 5 courses. And new this year is we are asking for a co-curricular activity list. So these are activities that you are thinking or committed to next year, just a list so that we can see the breadth and depth of your commitments in the coming year that in which REACH could be part of. So our deadline is March 24th, and at midnight the applications close, but you can submit anytime before that. We are encouraging you to submit as you go if everything's ready, because we are assessing it on a rolling basis until the 24th. And then on a practical note, in terms of the application process, it's a Microsoft Forms. So you do need to complete it in one session. So if you have all your required documents and answer everything, to do it all in one. And make sure you get that email confirmation of your answers, because that will mean that you have successfully submitted and we have it in our files. And our optional, what's new, after you submit your application, you will be invited to an optional student equity survey. And any admission decisions are not related to any of the information in the study, and it is anonymous. And it's part of, as Maren had mentioned, our equity, diversity, and inclusion charter, in which we're trying to understand who is applying to REACH, and is there ways that we can increase our diversity of our cohort. So we highly encourage everyone to complete it if you're comfortable to do so, as it helps us to get to know. And this is also in line with the U of T student equity survey. So after you submit, everyone will receive a response by May 13th, I believe. And those successful candidates will be invited to up to 3 rounds of interviews. So it is successional. And those interviews take place from May to June. The first 2 rounds will be over Zoom, and faculty or a REACH alumni such as Peter may join with a staff member. And then the 3rd round is most likely an in-person group interview. So I know it's a long series and some people were just wanting you to know what to expect and how our application process is. And then we do list on our website. So after the successful candidates that are selected to the REACH cohort, then will join us over the summer, as we talked about the orientation sessions, the pitching sessions and training camp, and once the research starts. So we've outlined the key dates of that on our website in terms of the REACH research process. So please take a look at that so that you can be able to be more familiar with availability and what is required once selected. So at this time we have 10 minutes. I haven't seen very many questions come through, but we can open it up for anybody that has questions, and they can be addressed to Sarah or Peter. I will ask, I know I'll get us started. One of the key questions that I get asked a lot from applicants is how much time does this take? How can people plan this? So I know that's a hard thing in terms of, we've outlined a lot of the different activities, but Peter and Sarah, can you kind of share your experiences of on a weekly basis, how you've managed REACH in addition to all your responsibilities? We can get started with Sarah since this is more fresh in your mind.
No, for sure. Yeah, that's something that we've been navigating for the last few months. Like, obviously our team is super busy, but I think one thing is it'll depend on the time of year and what part of the case study you're at. So for example, a lot of the initial phases of secondary research, it can be done on your own time a little bit more. Whereas right now, where we're at is with interviews, it also really depends on the people you're working with. So there's a little bit more flexibility that you need to have when you're working with hard to reach populations and making sure that you're accommodating their schedules as well. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. But in terms of it's probably just around like a couple hours a week, and it just depends, right, on whether or not you have a lot of deliverables coming up. Like, for example, when we were working on the REB, that was extremely chaotic because nobody like kind of knew what was going on. But as you navigate that, it's really kind of worthwhile. And once you get over those kind of big deliverables, the time commitment tends to go down.
Thanks. Peter, do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, it was similar for me as well, in that there were spikes. So definitely the REB was one of the bigger deliverables, and getting the logistics down for the travel aspect was also a really big part, because there was bookings and there was just a lot of the logistical aspects as well that we need to keep in mind. But like Sarah said, yeah, a couple hours per week probably is the averages out to that. And there's some time spent at the desk. So like research at home, or working online, like you would message your teammates and you would get some of the work done without having to call the meetings. But then there are we had the formal meetings as well, which for us, it was, I think, a bi-weekly basis. So that was probably, that's probably the amount of time that we spent for that.
Okay. And our next frequently asked questions. We do actually have a section, FAQs, on our website, so do check those out. But Maren, maybe I'll ask you to answer the important one, which is the difference between Peter and Sarah right now is one was in-person field interview, international context, and one is international context, but remote during this time of the pandemic. So can you share how will COVID be impacted for the next cohort?
Yeah, absolutely, Moni. And you're right, that's a common question that we do receive. So I would say that for the last 3 cohorts, the work has been done. The primary research has been conducted remotely because of the pandemic. So we've been very, very closely following the guidance from the University of Toronto. So it's less a decision that Reach makes, but actually more we're following along with the Center of International Experience and the VP International office. What I would say though is that we felt it was really important to carry on with Reach. I mean, there was certainly an option for us to suspend programming until we could return to travel. Certainly the travel is for us is an important component. And I'm sure Peter would say that it has, lended a lot to his experience and really deepened his understanding for the context. And it's certainly really important piece. But for us, when we decided to carry forward with the remote work, we actually felt like it was really important that we did do that, because we understand that students are increasingly going to be entering into jobs now where remote international engagement and work is expected. So from the future of work perspective, we felt like it was critical that the Reach researchers did have the opportunity to gain that experience remotely. And I've been chatting actually a lot with a number of researchers that are now just kind of landing their summer internships at places like McKinsey, as Sarah has. And they've been mentioning to us a lot that the experience that they gained in the remote setting that we've been operating in has actually been instrumental to them, because a lot of students didn't end up getting to go abroad and the program was completely canceled. So those that were able to participate in Reach and that were still able to do something international, even though it was remote, are actually seeing that they're set apart from a lot of the peers in these application cohorts. So certainly, hopefully we get back to the in-person component of this experience next year, knock on wood. But we are, rest assured that we are in a great position to complete the projects remotely if we do need to do that. So I think in either case, you'd be gaining skills that would really set you apart.
Great, thank you. And we have one final question here before we close. Is there special discipline or field of study you're looking for? Maren?
Yeah, I mean, and Moni could probably speak to this just as well. The entire purpose of Reach is that we have interdisciplinary teams. So we are looking for students from all schools and faculties, and we don't just pay lip service to that. I mean, Moni's been working tirelessly to schedule individual recruitment sessions across the University of Toronto, because it is so important to us that we do have Rotman and engineering and public health and information and global affairs and every other faculty represented in this cohort. And so we, if you're at Rotman, we're presenting to you for a reason. We want you to apply. We want to see you in the cohort. And, certainly Peter, I've combined your names. Sarah, Peter and Sarah. And I think that they're just alum that we're extremely, extremely proud of, and really, we're here showcasing them to you. So I think that's really a proof point that the Rotman influence and perspective is critical to the success of Reach in these case study reports. So please do apply.
Absolutely, yes, can echo everything. We actually have a specific question for Peter. So Nan An asked, I really enjoyed hearing your experience in travel. Can I know how it relates to this research role? Is there any opportunity for each analyst to travel? I think Maren we answered that in part in relation to COVID and how we comply with the University of Toronto, but maybe Peter, if you can answer in terms of your research role.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for your question. The travel aspect really allows you to employ a few techniques. One of them is called snowball interviewing, and you can really, when you're in the field, you can interview someone and get all the knowledge from the participant, and then that person will tell you who the next person or who someone of interest would be to talk to, and you can make that direct transition. I know you can do that remotely as well, but when you're in person and you're in the area, you can very much just go place to place, and it makes that technique more, I think, valuable in that sense. And also, I think depending on where you're trying to do research, it's a lot easier and more effective to do the interviews in person. And that may be the case for specific situations. I know we had online issues when we tried to do it remotely in the beginning, but I think that's also just dependent on where you're going. So that's sort of a few reasons. I think as it relates to research as well, like being in the field gives you perspective, being on the ground. So that's that.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, well, we'll look at that, 7 o'clock. We've ended right on time. Thank you so much, Sarah and Peter and Maren, for joining us, and everyone else. We really look forward to receiving your application. And if you have further questions, feel free to reach out to us via email, our website, and all of our social media accounts. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.